But now, here on this episode of Mastering Dungeons, we are going to talk about the adventure from Planescape Adventures in the Multiverse. So, this is the adventures part of Adventures in the Multiverse. We've already covered book 1, Sigil in the Outlands, and we've covered book 2, the monster book. Was it Mort's Planar
Parade?
something? Parade, thank you. I knew it was a P word, but I couldn't get there. So now we are going to look at book 3, the adventure Turn of Fortune's Wheel, which Teos is so elegantly displaying on the screen if you're watching.
And Shawn,
And even if you're not watching, he is still doing it.
still do it. Shawn, to celebrate this for those who can see, I was cleaning up, moving into a new game room area, and I found some really fun things like this gift box.
Ooh.
And I'm like, oh, is there anything in here? And I unwrapped this thing, not knowing what it was. And of all the stupid collectibles I have, dare I use that word, I have a stamp kit for Planescape.
Oh my goodness.
Dating back to the 80s. Right? So this is when he's like, you stamp it down and it leaves that. And I barely remember finding this. You have to wonder how many of these were ever made. Some TSR artifact of this Planescape stamp set, right? So I saw that and I said, I have to share.
Did you buy it? Can you even imagine where it came from?
I'm pretty sure I found it on eBay. Sometimes I keep things like searches on eBay, and something will be. I'm sure I paid $15, right, for it. Something really cheap for something that's probably worth a lot more today. But I laughed so hard that I have like this Sundering box that I think I also picked up on eBay, like a special thing that was sent out to influencers, and then I have this Planescape stamp thing, and then I'm like, all right, I guess I got to display that on my shelf somewhere.
That is amazing and horrifying.
I know, I'm a terrible nerd.
And I will get to my amazing and horrifying revelation later. But let's talk about Turn of Fortune's Wheel. So, like as we said, this is the adventure. There are spoilers in this episode. You have been warned. If you don't want to know what happens in this adventure, now's the time to check out. We apologize, but that's what we're here for. We're here to talk about these things so people are able to know what's in them and to use them to their utmost. So this is what we're going to look at.
And this adventure isn't one of those where like, oh, the spoilers at the end. Like the spoilers right at the beginning. There are various levels of spoilers, and the book tells you all of them up front, and so, or most of them at least, and so you're going to get the spoilers will be right at the beginning. So you don't want any of it if you don't want to be spoiled.
Yep. There you go. And so what we're going to look at in this adventure is it a good adventure? Is it a good Planescape adventure? And what does that mean? Does it show us how to create our own adventures and our own campaigns using all of these wonderful tools that the Planescape setting has given us? How do we use them to the fullest? We'll see if the adventure does that, or if it's just a good adventure and what we might do as DMs and as designers with this adventure. How long is this adventure? It is 96 pages. How does that compare, Teos, to some of the other things that you've seen and looked at?
Yeah, I mean, I took a look at Storm King's Thunder, which is in a much smaller font, and that is 230 pages of true adventure content, right? Not looking at backgrounds or anything like that. And even a more recent adventure like the Dragonlance book, right? Which has like a beginning that isn't really the adventure. It's sort of setup stuff and character backgrounds and things like that. But Dragonlance is still basically 150 pages of specifically the adventure, right? So this is a lot smaller, big font, 96 pages, lots of art. And so it'll go much quicker as an experience. And maybe that's an asset, but also worth understanding that this is relatively short compared to anything you've seen maybe in older 5th edition offerings.
Yeah. I don't consider that, like you said, I don't consider that necessarily a bad thing, depending on what is done with the content that we do have.
Yeah.
Some adventures do run on too long or should have been stopped, say, when you deal with the Frost Maiden and
Yeah.
solve the problems of Icewood Dale. But
True.
we will now get into the introduction, which tells us what we are getting into here. The introduction is called The Beginning of the End. What does it tell us? It tells us that we will go from Sigil to the fringes of the Outlands on a tour of remarkable realms, brushing shoulders with immortals and discovering a plot to change forever the multiverse. All right, that's what I want to hear.
Yeah.
I
Yeah. That
want to hear.
sounds
I
right.
want. I want this. Yep. So
Mm-hmm.
far, so good. The characters will begin in Sigil's morgue at 3rd level with no memory of where they came from. Okay, here's another reminder. We're about to spoil some big stuff here, the whole point of this adventure. So check out now if you don't want to be spoiled. So tell us about this introduction and what we know right from the start.
Yeah, well, they tell us the characters are going to find themselves in Sigil in this mortuary. They're going to end up meeting their Canaloth, Shemeska, and our Canaloths are fiends. Shemeska is a powerful information broker in Sigil who owns a casino named Fortune's Wheel. So that's where Turn of Fortune's Wheel comes from. Shemeska's going to offer to research the character's history in exchange for them hunting down a rogue Modron. This will send them across the Outlands, and they will find out information about Shemeska and the huge plot behind Shemeska being the villain. And they will realize they've actually encountered her many times in their prior lives, but now this one final time they have a chance to stop her. They're going to gain levels after particular chapters, reaching 10th level, and then when they discover their true selves, they will jump to 17th for the final chapter.
There you go. Then we hear about the whole twist that we're going to get with this adventure, which is the multiversal glitch. The book focuses on the characters being part of a multiversal glitch. Something's gone wrong with the multiverse, and the characters are feeling this effect. So they died after a remarkable life under suspicious means, somehow reborn, dissociated from the multiverse, but also having multiple or possible previous lives. So the characters are starting at 3rd level, and we're given the instructions as the game master to ask the players 3 questions of their character. What's your greatest decision or turning point? What's something your character wishes they could change? And what is the signature possession or physical trait that is most notable about your character? And we're sort of told why we're asking this, but we're not really told why we're asking this.
Mm-hmm.
Then we're told about incarnations. Each player has 2 other forms. So a player will be in one incarnation. If they die, they will be able to switch to a different incarnation of that character.
Mm-hmm.
All incarnations are the same level. So if you're still at level 3, all your incarnations are level 3. If you've leveled to level 7 and you die, all your incarnations are level 7. You can have these characters be as similar or different as you want. They could be a similar species, but a different class. They could be the same class, but completely different species. They could be very similar, except for some cosmetic differences. Then we get to how do we introduce this? And this is where we have a bit of a question. So go ahead, take over, Teos.
Yeah, so they say that the DM gets to decide, do you want to surprise the players with all of this incarnation business where they will learn about it the first time they die? Or do you want to create variants up front? But it doesn't really give guidance on how to explain this to the players. Just sort of like, well, hey, you could just say create, 2 alternate characters. And I think that we've seen like in the past, like say Dark Sun, for example, in 2nd edition would say create a character tree because it's so lethal that you need to have backup characters that we're going to swap to and rules for leveling them up and so on. And so maybe there could have been that approach here, but it doesn't. It just kind of gives us this option without really backing it up. It does tell us that each of the 3 incarnations a player plays should have a nexus feature, something that's a recurring object or trait and links them, like they have a scar or birthmark, distinctive symbol or clothing, right? You always have the red sash, or a signature weapon or piece of armor, a particular makeup or hairstyle, right? A blue streak in their hair, something like that. And so when an incarnation dies, one of the incarnations that didn't just die, so you have to swap, is restored after the current encounter. They appear attuned to any magic items to which the previous character was attuned, so they did address that kind of an issue. And before that new incarnation has appeared, you could do something like raise dead or something like that. They say that if you were to reincarnate the dead character, then now that incarnation would be in that new form for future, like future situations, right? If like you reincarnate into a goblin and then you die, next time you use that incarnation, they'd be in goblin form. So there's some of that. It doesn't cover all the situations. It gives you a few touch points to sort of help you try to kind of put your mind around it. I don't know that it's thorough, but then again, they're trying to keep that page count down. You as DM get to decide when the incarnation should return. And they should appear in a safe space. Like it recommends, like maybe it's a that they are in a closet somewhere, right? And they say the incarnation shouldn't come to you, you should come to them. So sort of as the characters are exploring, then they find that incarnation. One thing they don't really tell us, I think, I don't know if you saw this somewhere, but I presume the incarnations know everything, but maybe they don't. Like I was curious about to what extent the incarnations, I assume they remember everything they knew before, but do they know what the other character just went through? I'm guessing not. So maybe they have to get caught up to speed, every time, which could get kind of old.
Yeah, I'm guessing. I've read so many times in different areas that the characters don't know who they are, or so I feel like I read somewhere where it says a new incarnation does not know who they are either.
Yeah.
But it really doesn't talk about what if they know what the previous incarnation. I would say no, they
Yeah.
don't know what the previous incarnation did, but they may know what they have done as one of these incarnations if they come back.
Yeah, it does say they don't know how they ended up where they are. So if you find them in a closet,
Right.
they don't recall getting to the closet. There is some guidance around the fact that they're unkillable, right? So like that it's totally fine that if a character wants to chuck themselves into a machine to, clog up the gears, they know that'll kill them, but they also know that they're essentially just going to come back as another incarnation, that's okay because they're now out for the rest of at least that encounter, and really as long as you want. And we get some commentary of sort of some advice around, hey, you don't have to bring an incarnation back with full resources. So you could sort of put a little bit of the brakes on sacrifices by deciding like, hey, your incarnation shows up, but it's at half hit points, or, choose 5 spell slots to get rid of or something like that. And then they do have a sort of strange advice of like, if you get tired of playing a character, you could retire, I think, the entire character and all of its incarnations and make a new glitch character, which is really weird, but yeah, okay, whatever. Like, I mean, if a player's not happy, sure, accommodate them, but it's sort of strange advice. And then we're told that in chapter 14, the glitch will end. From then on, you're going to play your only character, one single higher level character, and at that point, death is permanent. There's no more of this stuff. You've figured yourself out, and so on.
Yeah, this is super interesting, and you said in your notes that it's a weird concept, but good for Planescape.
Yeah.
It draws on Planescape Torment, the video game, which a lot of people came into D&D through. So it hits that nostalgia button really hard. Many other kinds of media, right? There are movies out there. The Edge of Tomorrow, I think, is one, and Groundhog Day, and this whole idea of you're coming back, so you're actually going to use this as a way to solve your problems, knowing that you don't have to worry about permanently being dead if you somehow perish during your adventure. And that is a very powerful tool. And so you need to think carefully about how you as the game master are going to use that tool. Do you want to hide it and spring it on the characters when it first happens? do you want to just explain everything up front right away and put the tool into the player's hands right away, so that they're making their glitch characters right when they're making their regular character, and they can plan everything out, and they know what, you can make a better story that way, perhaps. It loses some of the surprise,
Yeah.
but maybe is the surprise, that moment of surprise, is it worth the hassle that it would put everyone through to make more characters later? It's a tough
Yeah.
question, and it's something, going back to our listener questions, right? It's something that you communicate ahead of time, or at
Yeah.
least figure out ahead of time, knowing your player preferences, to get the right tone and the right flow of your campaign.
Yeah, I think that what I would do is I would and what I what works for me is I would want the surprise, but I would also not, what I don't want is your character died. Oh hey, make a new character. Here are all these rules while we continue playing, because character creation just takes too long.
Mm-hmm.
So I think what I would do is I would say to the players, this could be pretty lethal. Create two characters with one of them as your primary. Have some connection. Think through some connection between your two characters in some way. Not that they know each other, but some similarity or something like that. Something that would tie them together. Leave it at that. When the first one dies, then go like, okay, we find that once you find the other incarnation, right, and go, hey, bring out your backup character, and moments later you could say to the whole players, hey everybody, now you get it. This is true for all of you. So I want you to make a third character between now and the next session, and go back and if need be, think through this nexus feature and create that across all three characters. Maybe that connection you came up with before works, or maybe it doesn't. Feel free to change it. But we at least sort of had something to work off of. You could easily jump back in if you died, but you haven't made three characters. You've made two, and something like that. I would probably split the difference.
Mm-hmm. I would do this. I would tell the characters, we're going to play a Planescape game. Here are the rules for making a Planescape character. Bring a character. When they get there, I'm going to hand them a pre-generated character. I'm going to say, start with this character. And as we're playing, somebody, as we will talk about with the opening chapter, is likely to die.
Mm-hmm.
When that happens, I'm going to say, I'm going to change the way the glitch works, because this is my campaign and this is how I want to run it.
Yep.
I'm going to say, you're looking at your friend who is probably ashes on the floor. And where those ashes used to be, there is now a person. And you see this strange sort of hazy warp look all of a sudden pop into focus. And there is that character. And then I will just continue along those lines. Maybe after chapter 1, assuming maybe one or two other characters die, I will then say, make a third character in your free time and bring that next time, and sort of introduce it slowly.
I also like this. You've got a thing here. I would eliminate the need for death and let the players decide if when they glitch. And I think that could be a really powerful thing to do. Maybe it uses inspiration, right? Or something like that. But that idea that you could switch every now and then could be really cool. It also solves another problem that isn't addressed here at all, which is party balance, right? A lot of times when you play in a campaign, even if the players just show up with whatever they made, they will over time specialize based on each other, right? So if two people created, I can disarm traps, one of them will keep focusing on it, and the other one just sort of lets it be as a secondary in case thing and doesn't focus that way because it's already covered. And if nobody can deal with traps, then somebody picks up spells or training or something. But here, both people who could be the trap people just are gone, and you're playing all wizard party all of a sudden, and so that's where it could be worthwhile to let the characters go like, no, I need to go back to my rogue self and bring that person in and deal with this trap, and have some way that you do that. Maybe at a cost, right? Like maybe your current incarnation has to burn through healing surges or use inspiration or whatever. And something like that could be really fun. And I would have liked something like that in this adventure to allow for it. I'm watching, or I just finished watching Loki season
Mhm.
2, and thinking of that idea of exerting yourself to sort of do what you need to do within the time stream, right? I think that's appealing to players today too.
Yeah. The one reason I put that in there, just let them glitch, is because it's sort of gruesome to say, well, I can solve this problem, but I need to kill myself to do it. That's not going to set well with everyone,
Sure.
especially with some mental health issues out there.
We need a
It may
rogue.
get
Hold on.
yeah, it may get a little dark, and you get that, right? You
Yeah.
get that oh boy, we really need the cleric now, and the cleric, oh well, let me take care of that. So just allowing them to do it,
Yeah.
maybe with a small penalty, or
Hmm.
with, you're when you glitch in, you have half the hit dice that you're supposed to have, or you have no hit dice left, or something.
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
that would give it, that just makes it easier to manage. And maybe even after a couple of levels, they can do that.
Yeah.
They learn to
Hmm.
control it. uh, would be interesting.
That could be really cool. Yeah, that's a neat idea too. Or you maybe you can do it once per level or something like, some kind of.
Mhm.
It's probably nice to start with not letting it happen all the time, but allowing for that, and yeah, you also don't want. I think the point, one of the points that they're doing here mechanically is they're saying like when your incarnation dies, you bring in a new one,
Mhm.
and that can't be the same one that just died. And the idea is to switch these around because otherwise you won't feel this sort of multiversal angle, right? And that is part of the point. But it is also a little disjointing and it doesn't address this at all, is you're telling players to play different characters. Are they supposed to be the same personality
Mhm.
or reflections? And I think they are, right? Because they're kind of variants, if you will, in Marvel terms. Um,
Mhm.
but should you be having that sort of an experience, which is really cool, but then you want to dig into that, right? If you want to say like, hey, I'm playing a wizard, a barbarian, and a rogue who are all alternate realities of what I could have become.
Mhm. Right.
And that's kind of what they're getting at, but they don't super say you have to do that, right? But I think
Right.
that's a lot of the fun if your players can get into it.
Right. And that's the thing. They ask those questions at the start. What was a turning point in your character's life?
Yeah.
And so you're like, oh, okay, I see what they're doing. You're going to have three versions. They're all going to be human, but one's going to be a ranger, and one's going to be a rogue, and one's going to be, a monk, because they made these choices. But it's not that. It's not, has nothing to do, or it doesn't seem to have anything to do with the timeline. And then it says, at the end, the characters will learn why this is happening, but they don't tell you up front. That's the one thing they don't spoil up front,
Yeah.
which, as a game master, that's what I need to know,
Hmm.
so that these decisions that I might make, yes, I can go through, I can read through the whole thing, but again, I want to be able to run this adventure without having to read all the way through it, even though it's only 96 pages of large font. So I want to know up front, if I decide that you can just glitch without perishing, does that make sense with the story that is
It will
why
come.
this is
Yeah.
happening? So I want to know that up front, so I
That's a
can
good.
make a change.
That's a good point. This adventure spoils a number of things, but it doesn't here tell you your true story, and it probably should for the DM.
Mhm.
It just sort of like it names the villain, and I actually wondered whether it should say this is the villain because it's a lot easier to as a DM to role play the villain not being the villain, even if if you read the whole adventure. Just having all the text line up with pretending they're not it's easier to
Mhm.
DM that, right? And the moment you really are
Right.
saying that in the text, it's like in your brain. And that's why we'll talk about this later, but there's a part where they meet them, and I think that you kind of need to say like, yeah, here's how to run that so you don't give it away. You know?
Mhm. Sure.
Yeah.
Yep. So that is the important part of the adventure. We get the backgrounds about what's happening, then we get the glitch, then we get into the adventure itself, starting with the first chapter of the adventure, called Grave Escape. And if you played Planescape Torment, You know this beginning. The characters wake up in Sigil's mortuary basement, lying on medical examination tables as if they're dead. Their stuff is, on the shelf nearby, and a floating, talking skull is looking down on them. Mort, you know, starts exposing and expounding on the story as it has happened so far. Hey, why are you alive? You're not supposed to be alive. Oh, you're in big trouble if you're down here alive. You better get out of here. And that's where the adventure kicks off.
Yeah. And it's a fun beginning, right? I think that's a neat shocker. I'm okay with it being like the video game. I think so far everything about this to me is awesome, right? There's some things that would handle differently, but I love the idea of a glitch. I think that's the kind of dream big, be bold kind of thing that Planescape needs. And a classic callback, I'm okay with that. I think that's fun.
Absolutely. So with this information that they're alive, but they can't remember anything, they know what they can do, but they don't know who they are, which is a typical trope for these kinds of adventures.
And also the typical trope, nobody can answer anything useful, right? You talk to Mort and he'll answer questions and knows basically nothing of use other than, hey, you're in the mortuary and Sigil. The Heralds of Dust faction will totally want you dead because once a thing dies, they want it to like stay in its current shape. So that you're supposed to be dead. They will not take kindly if they see you. So good luck getting out of here. And you will meet NPC or creature upon creature that does not tell you how to get out. It's like they've all just been living here, right? And just they're either going to attack you or they don't know how to get out.
Yeah, and they're more likely than not to attack you, and more likely than not can do a lot of damage with those attacks. This was I when I saw the adventure starts at 3rd level, I was like, okay, good. This isn't an intro adventure. This isn't a learn to play adventure. This is probably going to be played by people who are pretty familiar with the rules. They understand what this is about. Start at 3rd level, makes it less swingy. Great. And then I realized that they really should die in this first chapter to introduce this glitch concept. So that's too bad. Maybe they should have started at 1st level to make them easier to kill, because there's nothing more difficult than following the rules but still killing a character once they hit 3rd, 4th level, and then beyond that it's practically impossible.
I mean, I think maybe one of the virtues of starting at 3rd is that you maybe aren't super aware of what your character can do, and even when swapping characters, that becomes more true, right? Like you swap to another incarnation and you're like, yeah, what is this? There are all these features, I'm not going to be particularly great at using them. But I agree that it would be easier to kill them out. In fact, I have run this as part of the playtest, and I can't talk about what the playtest was like versus this, but I'll just say that I don't think we had any deaths in that playtest. If we did, maybe one. Characters were particularly good at avoiding these terrible dangers. One thing is they were very afraid of this. This place feels harmful and spooky and dangerous. It has a macabre feel. And so characters, at least in our party, were very cautious, right? They were not touching the thing that looks interesting. They were like, let's just go to another room, find a way out. And so that caution meant that it was a little harder to kill characters than you'd think, even though there are, and I somewhat they got lucky and didn't just walk into the rooms that immediately become a combat. But there are a number of fun encounters here, right, Shawn? You want to share any of these? That
Sure. There's Poltergeist putting on a puppet show for skeletons. Poltergeist can move objects right with their powers, and so if the characters interrupt, the skeletons and the poltergeists attack, or the characters can join in. But if the character dies, the poltergeist use the body as a puppet to join in the puppet show, which I thought was macabre and totally hilarious. A Herald of Dust member dissecting a flesh golem, and as soon as it realizes that there are living creatures here, they both attack. That's a CR4 and a CR5 monster together against 3rd level characters, which most characters will probably survive, but it might use a bit of resources. I would have loved to do something funny with the flesh golem, who has a big hole in its chest because the Herald of Dust had dropped a key into it while it was operating, so now it's trying to get it out. The incinerator is hilarious. This is where most characters should die if it's done well, because as soon as you move into like the circular tube hallway, a character or a zombie on the other side pulls a lever which locks doors on both sides, and then pulls a lever that does 44 points of fire damage. And I think it's like a DC 18 save to take half. So at third level, most characters, unless you're like fighters or barbarians, are going to have around 22 to 24 hit points. And that's so that's
Yeah.
dead, and mostly dead right off the bat for that.
And one thing that's interesting to look at, so this first series here has a number of things that can kill you, right? The things you've mentioned, a poison banquet hall, a demi-lich who records the dead, has writer's block for writing an epitaph for somebody, but will kill you if you don't do a good job at it. All of these things are pretty deadly. Is the rest of the adventure going to be this way, right? If the idea is that we switch incarnations, I'm curious to see how hard they made the rest, whether it has this sort of randomness to it of like, oh boy, gee, this huge thing can just murder me. But that's okay because incarnations, or, will we not? And design wise, I couldn't help but think to myself, how often do I think characters should die in this adventure? And it's a tough question to answer.
It is, and it's something that I don't have the answer to because I have only read up to a certain point, but I thought the exact same thing. Are we really going to lean into this? Are we, if we're going to do it, let's do it.
Yeah.
Right. If we're going to do this, let's do it all the way. And it's a tough challenge though, because by making every encounter practically deadly, then it's hard to get through the adventure.
Yes.
D&D counts on you succeeding.
Yeah. The other thing is you don't want to TPK. You want to kill one or two characters, but have them move forward. And there's a little bit of word there, sort of like, I think there's some advice that sort of says, like, you get to decide what happens if it's a TPK. And it's like, well, do you know how D&D works? Because D&D usually, it's all or nothing, right? Either characters down and someone brings them back up and they don't actually die, or 3 characters are down and now we could quickly get to TPK land. But just one character outright being taken out is difficult unless you do things like 44 fire damage. You have to have these singular just blasts, right? Because otherwise it's too easy to, like, if you just say high CR monsters, well, that can be a TPK.
Yeah, it's got to be like one shot, save or die sort of things, which good design tells you not to do.
Well,
but this isn't a regular adventure. This is something special. So all normal, right, common wisdom designed canards go right out the window.
Yeah.
With this sort of design.
It's going to be interesting to see.
Yep. So eventually, if you survive all of these strange encounters, and the map is strange because there's, the map it's neat. It's a really cool map, but there is like a straight path right out that you could take if you get lucky, where you literally only have to go through 1 or 2 encounters. I'm trying to remember what's right outside of the main area. Is there another area, or is it just a hallway?
No, so you can go out from the mortuary start through the incinerator, and then you can go from there around a hallway
out, right?
And out. Yeah. So if you get lucky, you can make it out pretty quickly, which when we ran a playtest, that's what happened. They got out pretty quickly, and I forget whether maybe one character died in the incineration, but if so, that's it.
And just another spoiler alert here. This is the adventure that Baldman Games is running as their intro to Planescape at PAX and at PAX Unplugged and at Winter Fantasy. So running this as an intro adventure could be very short. So it's something that will have to be done by DMs to make sure that this
Yeah.
2 or 4 or however many hours it is, everyone gets to now to do every room though would probably take 8 hours. So it's sort of
Right.
it's going to be an interesting call.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe they have pre-gens or something, just be like, here, look, you came back as another character. Choose something that,
Yeah. Yep.
makes it look like you. Um, yeah. So overall, I mean, I thought this was a great start. There's some fascinating stuff. There's,
Mhm.
a faction. You start in a faction location, surprises, some neat encounters. I really like the design of the mortuary. They have fun things like, a cold locker with interesting bodies inside. Just some really fun and quirky and humorous. Um, uh, this start super solid. I've got some cautions about how it's all going to play out and how this all works, but everything that's been
Mhm.
seen so far, I feel very strongly with, and I felt strongly with back even during the playtest time. Um, so I'm very curious where it'll go from here, Shawn. Very curious.
Yep. Do you want to say where it goes from here?
Well, do you want to go into chapter 2?
I'm fine with that because I had trouble with chapter 2. Uh, not just in the sense that I'm reading it, I'm like, okay, tell me the story, tell me where the characters go from here, and we sort of get this. Here's what they know about Sigil, which we already got out of the Sigil and the Outlands book. Here are some encounters that they might have.
Yeah.
Here are some things that they might learn. But as I'm reading it, I'm like, I don't understand what is supposed to happen. Now, granted, I skimmed it pretty quickly,
Yeah.
but I was looking for like, here's encounter one, here's encounter two, here's what they learn, here's where they learn where to go. And then I'm like, where is that information? I can't find it.
Chapter 2 is, I would say, as weak as chapter 1 is strong, because
Okay.
it is really there's not a lot of support, and I don't appreciate how it's set up. So the setup is you emerge from the mortuary basement onto the streets of Sigil, and you go, whoa, look, it's Sigil. And some dude bumps into you and kind of just, but it's just a commoner, but just bumps into you and says rude stuff. And a Barriar uh, tout, so this is one of the guides of Sigil, says, hey, I can help you out. Right. So the idea is supposed to be that in this world full of confusion, don't know what to do, a guide has presented themselves and offers help. And for 3 gold a day, which you've got your gear so you can easily afford, they will guide you around Planescape. So good, that helps. You just gave a friendly NPC and so on that could help you here. But then the question is, well, what are you do? And the book sort of goes like,
Mhm.
explore Sigil. And here are some ideas, but you've got the guidebook.
Mhm.
Just run, what do they want to do? Do they want to go eat planar grub? Do they want to get ink at Fell's tattoos? And it all sounds lovely, but I'm not here on a Disney cruise. I need to figure out who I am. I just escaped the mortuary basement.
Right.
And it does say, like, well, maybe it's got a paragraph here, big or 2 paragraphs on who am I? Like maybe you want to go off
Mhm.
and but essentially what it says is the Hall of Records has no information. The Institute for Intellectual Excellence has no information. And I think that what would have worked for, I worry that doesn't work for most groups. And most
Mhm.
groups, the players are going to
Right.
say, I need to figure out who I am. So I want to go to the Hall of Records. And you can say, great, let's go to, or I want to go to some place that has information. Well, there's the Hall of Records. And on the way to the Hall of Records, you could present fun and interesting things about Sigil.
Mhm.
And now that experience would
Mhm.
feel good. You wouldn't feel like everything is just, like you're being shunted off into Disneyland when you're actually supposed to be on a mission. You can be on your mission, and there's some pieces here that they tell you that are, it's sort of swept aside text wise. Like it says, like when you visit Fell's tattoos, maybe you realize your character has a fear of needles. And the concept is that you're going to maybe learn about yourself as you're in Sigil, but I guess it's up to the player. And I would have liked a better mechanic for that. Like if we said, great, the characters go to the Hall of Records or wherever they want to go to, which will probably be a place like that to find about themselves. Along the way, they can find some things that are interesting and cool. And when they're doing these cool, interesting things, they can learn about themselves in vague ways. And you can give them a prompting. Here's some example questions you could ask, right? How do you feel about this kind of food? And when they answer, you could say, you realize this is how you've always felt, right? Like you unlock this part of your character.
Mhm.
So I just felt like this was kind of weird. You do have 2 sigil encounters they give you that I think are okay. There's a Society of Sensation Muse that comes up to you and wants to record sensations, and you can either express them or like one of them's fear. So you could either like startle a commoner walking by, and she's recording this, or you could somehow cause fear in yourself or something like that. And that's all right. It's okay. Introduces a faction, sort of. There's
Mhm.
planar philosophers. You meet 3 philosophers discussing deities, and you can opine. You might even be asked to join a faction, and you could presumably go hang out with them. But again, nothing leads to help. Nothing's mission related.
Yeah.
Um, and then the harmonium come in, the philosophers with clubs.
Okay.
Um, and the idea here is that uh, the harmonium, which are peacekeepers and kind of charged with the laws of sigil, have realized that these characters somehow are part of a glitch, are somehow wrong, and so they come to arrest you for crimes against the multiverse. And this then is a very railroady piece where you get to choose: are you going to go with them or fight them? If you fight them, a Shatterkai shows up and sort of helps you. Hey, this way, escape this way, follow me. I know a way out of here. Or if you give in to these harmonium officers, a harmonian officer, which is actually a disguised Shatterkai, same person, will come and say, I'll take them from here, and then say, I'm helping you escape, come with me. And the kind of stick/carrot is, I know that these harmonium will not rest until they've got you, but I'm going to help you escape. And I can take you to a safe place. But will not say what's really going on, which is, I work for Shemeska and I'm taking you to her location. And it
Mm.
feels weird. It's not, it'd be one thing if there was carrot, like, I know somebody who can tell you who you are.
Mhm.
Something like that.
Right.
But it's just sort of like, come with me if you want to live. And characters don't generally do that. They kind of go like, who are you? I don't trust you. In fact, I trust you less because you offered me help.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like I would, knowing that now, having you explain it to
Mm-hmm.
me, I would put something on each of the characters that is a clue that leads them somewhere,
Mm,
that would then lead them to this person.
yeah.
Uh, oh, your character has a tattoo. As soon as you come out, someone says, oh, did you get that at Fells? I love that. Here's mine.
Right.
Oh, I got this tattoo at Fells. Let's go to Fells.
Yeah.
You could have encounters along the way. The person at Fells could say, yeah, I've just started working here. I didn't do that, but I know somebody who has one that I did. It's
Mm-hmm.
a person who's in this faction. They send you
Yeah.
there, that then it
Or I
goes
know somebody who got the same tattoo. I can tell you where they are. Some kind of connection like that, so that
right.
you feel like you're in charge of following where this is going. Instead, this is one long chapter
Yeah.
of, I don't know why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I think as DM, you're like, I don't know how to tell you to do the things you're supposed to do, even whether that's like, hey, here's the map
Mhm.
of Sigil. Where do you want to go? But which feels weird. I mean, I just got out of the basement. Are they looking for me? Do I need to watch out for the Heralds of Dust? Oh no, it's the Harmonium. So somehow you're supposed to end up with Farrow, this agent of Shemeska, who
Mhm.
does not tell you that's who she is. And she takes you into the Undersigil to get you to the safe place, quote unquote. One of the important things that isn't addressed is what happens if Farrow dies, because she has the stat block of a spy. So she could easily bite it. Not easily, but
Mhm.
she could bite it.
Right.
And especially there are 2 encounters. The first one is just sort of like a kind of clue prequel thing, which is you find a cranium rat that mentally communicates sort of like, do your worst. We've already won, which is a little cryptic. And I guess the point is it has eaten poisoned cake. So it's like I'm defenseless. I already won because I ate cake, I think is what it's saying. And then maybe you figure out the poison part, which when you get to the tea party, which is a bunch of cakers, this faction that has not done well, and it has made cakes down here in this weird sewer place, and it is throwing a party and invites you. And if you sit down for 10 minutes, cool, you can go on and be undisturbed. Otherwise, it's a fight. And oh, by the way, the cake has like weird bat wings coming out of it. And you can do a check to realize that it's black blood and isn't a normal bat. But that's the only check. If you eat the cake, you are cursed and you will turn into a Vargoyle. There's no saving throw. It's just what's going to happen. And if you fight, well, they are, defeatable, but they are, what are they? They're thugs, which, thugs are hard, but there are only 4 of them. When they die, they become Vargoyle reflections, however. So it's a decent fight. And there are some teleporters. There are sort of sewer pipes that they can go through. Anybody can go through, but they know where the lead. So they can kind of hop around the battlefield. Not that it's super helpful for a thug, but they can do that. And the Vargoyles can do that. Once you defeat them, you can go on your way. I guess some of you probably maybe become Vargoyles. It doesn't really say here that a Vargoyle damages an incarnation. So apparently you're okay to come back as that incarnation later on. And then you show up. You come out of you come out of Under Sigil in the ladies' ward, and you're about a block away from where you need to go. So again, Farrow better be alive. There's no notion of what Farrow does in that previous encounter, by the way. Like, does she eat cake? Important question. Not. It's the usual where the NPC fades into the background. But then you're supposed to. Farrow will take you to this casino, and this is her safe place. And then we'll see in the next chapter when we talk about it, kind of everything that happens in the casino, which is owned by Shemeska, and how that plays out. But I found this chapter 1 is so strong. And then chapter 2 is just, I don't know what happened here and what this experience is trying to do. And it feels like it needed a development phase that would really focus that play experience or focus it for the DM and the players, right? It can have many options. It can be open, but give me something to go on. Like, yeah, if you're right, if you had the chance to go through your personal belongings and you found 4 clues, like that tattoo parlor, the philosopher's station where they gather and have discourse, but then there were clues about you in some way that can be vague, almost even meaningless, maybe personally meaningful, but plot-wise meaningless. But you would go after them and you would feel like you were in charge of this. Instead, it just feels like led by the nose to one thing after the other.
Yeah. And I'm not even opposed to sometimes lead you by the nose if it's clear to the DM. These are the 4 encounters they need to go through. Intersperse other things in there if you want, but go A, B, C, D. If you have 2 hours, just do that.
Yeah.
If you have more time, play out these things. But yeah, I was just so confused as I was trying to read it.
I mean, so I've
what needed to happen.
Because I've played it or I've run it and then read it. So this is now my second time reading it, and I've run it. It's a little easier for me to get, but yeah, it's complicated. And as a DM, it's intimidating. And just, it falls apart a bit, unfortunately, which is too bad. So we'll see how the next part goes. Hopefully better.
That's okay. That's right. We'll check out chapter 3 and beyond on the next show.
And I don't know if we said it. At the end of each of these chapters, you gained a level. So they were 3. They gained a level at the end of the mortuary. So they're actually level 4 when they're going through chapter 2. And now going into chapter 3, they'll be level 5.
Thank you for sharing your expertise with us, Teos.
Always a pleasure. Thank you, Shawn.
And thank you to all of our listeners. We hope you are enjoying our show. Thank you to those who support us via Patreon as well. Thank you to our Master of Dungeon supporters. A special shout out in our show notes goes to our Master of Realm supporters. And for our Masters of the Multiverse, you know what's coming. Keith Emmon of The Monsters Know What They're Doing. Craig Bailey, Steve Bissonette, Merrick Blackman, Evil John, DM Chad, Darren Chandler, Seth Eckel, Andy Edmonds at Nerdronomicon, Nathan Fuller, The Mighty Jerd, Ben Heisler and Paige Lightman, Sean Hurst, Chad Jackson, Brian King, Jim Klingler, aka DM Prime Mover, Chad Lynch, The Mathemagician, Eric Mengi, The Micro Ant, Sean Malley, Falcon Neal, Post Fiction RPG Audio, Robert Pasley, Vladimir Prenner from Croatia, Chance Russo at Drago Russo, Sean Ross Sandberg, Andy Shockney, Krishna Simose, David Somerville from Prismanox.com, Joe Tyler, James Walton, and Graham Ward. Thank you for being masters of our multiverse. If you, yes, you listening or watching, if you would like to become a patron of the show, we would very much appreciate that. You can go to patreon.com/masteringdnd to show your support there. Ask us questions, join our Discord where we have great conversations about all of these topics that we talk about and more. If you can't support us financially, we completely understand that. You could help us out in many other ways. You could leave us a review on Apple Podcast or wherever you listen to the podcast. You could also subscribe on our YouTube channel to give us a little bit more of a reach there. Teos, you've been doing a lot of work outside of this show. What have you been doing and where can people find it?
I broke down the changes that D&D has been doing to their core books, the 2014 core books, and what the language is like and what we can learn from that. So you can check that out at alphastream.org or on my YouTube channel, which you can also get to through there. Shawn, where are you hiding out these days?
I am not hiding. I am proudly on many social media channels, such as Twitter and Mastodon and Blue Sky, all of it at Shawn Merwin, and the show at Mastering D&D are on those same media platforms as well. You can always join our community and ask questions to us via Patreon, or you can leave comments on our YouTube channel called, imagine that, Mastering Dungeons. So, Teos, we have escaped the mortuary and have done a quick little tour of Sigil before heading to the ladies' ward. So,
Yeah.
what are we going to do now?
I'm going to prepare for a fantastic Thanksgiving friend when you're around with family, relatives. You can just assign a faction to each of them. Choose which faction from Planescape matches your various relatives. It's a great game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
What are you
and
doing?
do not feed them blood cake.
Oh, yeah, no. Mm-mm. You don't want their head coming off. That's
Because
bad.
Vargoyle families are not the families that you want.